I'm by the window, checking that no one's home, because otherwise I can't film. Because I get so embarrassed. My fringe will not stop, just pushing up, and I don't know what to do about it. Last video, my sound was quiet and then it went loud, so I've conscripted the help of a microphone this time to see if that fixes it. If that doesn't fix it, then I'll just cry. How is everyone? Oh God, just kicked. I'm so sorry. I'm sat on the floor, so it's like there's not much room around me. But it's the best view with my bookshelf in the back, which is a nice little backdrop. So I thought I'd just sit on the floor. But if I do kick, you're sat on an ottoman. So if I do kick the ottoman, then I'm very sorry. I don't mean to. It's also falling apart, but we'll ignore that. A chaotic start to a video. But yeah, in this video, I'm going to go through my recommendations for if you want to get into reading books, reading romantasy specifically. But if you want to get into reading, maybe these will sort of spur you on to your reading journey. So a little bit about my reading journey. I tried to start reading in August of 2021, and I picked up Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. Brilliant book. Loved it. That genre is not typically my genre. I love to read romantasy. I love it, love it, love it. So Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine got me into reading books, but I still wasn't reading like I'm reading now. I was just kind of just reading here and there, you know, one book every 4 or 5 months, that type of thing. And then I picked up, I have it here next to me. You will not be shocked by this. You will not be shocked by this. But then I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I have just read so many brilliant books since then that I thought I'd compile a little guide as to if I was wanting to get into reading now, what would I want someone to suggest to me? Like, what would I want someone to say, hey, read this book, this is really good. Like, where would I want to start if I was starting right now? Little disclaimer, you may read some of these books and not like them. I'm not saying that because, you know, I'm suggesting them that they're brilliant, everyone loves them. Like, a lot of people do like them, but reading is subjective, as always. So, you know, you might like them, but you also might think that was terrible. Each to their own. The first suggestion that I have, and this is in no particular order, I'm not saying read this first to get into this, I'm just saying that these are really good books if you want to get into reading romantasy or fantasy, because some of them are lighter on the fantasy, heavier on the romance. I started with A Court of Thorns and Roses. I know a lot of people did have that same journey, started with A Court of Thorns and Roses and then just skyrocketed from there. Everyone's reading books now, but you can start there if you want to. But here's some other suggestions if you did want to get started. A series that I really, really loved because I just thought it was so different. It's classed as a YA fantasy. There is some romance in it, but there's not much. There's like a little bit of tension here and there, a little bit of hands brushing. You know, there is some suggestive comment in the second book, but in the first book, there's not that much. But it's got a really unique magic system. It's just got a really good story. It's gothic, it's dark, but obviously it's YA, so it's not too dark, but it is. The Shepherd King duology. I think this duology is just absolutely brilliant. I think Rachel Gillig absolutely smashed it out the park. So it's One Dark Window and Two Twisted Crowns. So I'll read a little bit of the blurb because I'm terrible at describing books. So Elspeth Spindle needs more than luck to stay safe in the eerie, mist-locked kingdom of Blunder. She needs a monster. She calls him the Nightmare. An ancient mercurial spirit trapped in her head. He protects her. He keeps her secrets. But nothing comes for free, especially magic. Brilliant. It's not overly complicated. It just takes a minute to get your head around it. I'd say the first 100 to 150 pages is a lot of world building. So if you fancy that, if you think that's a bit of me, start with these ones. Next up is a book that I read recently and has recently become really, really popular with all the book girlies on Book Talk, and it is Metal Slinger. So Metal Slinger is about Bryn, and she spent the better part of her life waiting for the chance to attend the annual market hosted by the Kenta, another set of people. So basically in this book, Bryn is part of the people who are exiled to Alaha, and Kenta are the people that live on land. It's basically separated between people who live on water and people who live on land. And by on water, I mean they live in like, this is how I imagined it. They kind of live like on boats, but they're more structures, and it's like a big town area, Alaha Kingdom, maybe you'd say. So I imagined it as like wooden planks, boards, big ships that are just stationary, but they don't look like ships. They look more like, you know what I mean, like building ships. Yeah, you get what I'm saying, I hope. But essentially she's been exiled with those people, and she wants to go and visit the market, which is on land. This one does have a little bit of world building, but there's not loads in it, and there's a good bit of romance in this one. So this is very true to romantasy. So I definitely give this one a go. It's not complicated in the magic system. It's an elemental magic system. So I really, really enjoyed that. Rachel Snyder hit it on the head with this one, but I need book 2 like yesterday. And if you read this, you'll find out why. So next one probably won't be a surprise to anyone either. I haven't taken my The Works sticker off there, but oh, it's reflecting off my light. Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Let's read a little bit of the blurb on this one. The elites have possessed power for decades, gifted to them by the plague, while those born ordinary are just that, banished from the kingdom of Ilia and shunned from society. No one knows this better than Peyton Grey, an ordinary posing as a psychic to blend in with the elites. When she's unsuspectingly saves one of Ilia's princes, Kai Azza, she's thrown into the purging trials, a brutal competition showcasing the elite's powers. And that's essentially that. It's kind of a mix between Hunger Games and romance. I don't know. It's kind of like Hunger Games. I've heard it's very close to The Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. Is that how you say it? Aveyard? I don't know how to say her last name. I haven't read The Red Queen, but I do want to read it. But this was a silly, goofy, fun time, I thought. It was very light, easy to take in, easy to read. It was just a fun time. Lots of banter, lots of tension. You know, we love to see it. It's just, like I said, it's a good one to get you started with, especially if you're coming, I would say, from like contemporary romance. If you do already read, but you want to get more into fantasy, I'd give this one a go, because I'd say it's closer to contemporary romance. Or I wouldn't normally recommend it, but if you're coming from contemporary romance, maybe give Bride a go. I didn't really like this book, but I can see if you did like contemporary romance, then maybe you'd like this one. I just didn't enjoy it that much. I would recommend Powerless if you're wanting to get into fantasy coming from contemporary romance, or if you're just wanting to get into romantasy, it's a good place to start. The edges are pretty. But now we're going to get into the books that no one is going to be surprised by. Everyone's going to go, every time I watch one of these videos, these 3 books come up, and with good reason. So, first one, the OG, A Court of Thorns and Roses. If you're wanting to get into romantasy, I think this is a brilliant place to start. I started with this one, and I just thought it was just so good. The whole story, so good. So much goes on in it. The characters I loved. If you are wanting to get into romantasy or fantasy, I've heard some people say, there's a booktuber on here that I watch called Corrie Bromfield, and she suggested maybe going from Fourth Wing first, which I think is a really good suggestion, because this one, if you're not into fantasy at all, this is heavy on the fae, heavy on the otherworldly creatures, should I say, more of the fantasy side of it. But I started with it and I didn't mind it. But Corrie made a really good point in that she said her friend started with this and just couldn't get into it and was like, I'm not even going to go on to the second book. And my sister actually started reading this, and after I'd read this, I flew through it. I absolutely loved it. I flew through the whole series after that, but my sister was a bit like, I'm not really fussed. So it's a good point. Maybe if you're wanting to get into this sort of genre, try Fourth Wing first, which is actually my next suggestion. This one is... They're like the OGs of Book Talk, aren't they? They're just the OGs of Book Talk, but I do think they're a good starting place. Like, as much crap as these books get, I really do think they are such a good starting place if you're wanting to get into reading. I just think they're easy, they're fun, they're a silly, goofy, fun time. That's what I think. And I just think there's no harm to be lost, or whatever the saying is, if you're just going to read it. Like, if you just want to read it, like, give it a go. It's only 400 and something pages. If you don't like it, you don't like it. And that's that. But Fourth Wing is my next suggestion. So, like I said with this one's more fae, otherworldly creatures, stuff like that. This one is, I think, yeah, they're humans. This one is humans, but it's got dragons in it. So it's basically, it's set in a war college, and in the war college you have to bond with a dragon. So yeah, it's all about the dragons and the humans and stuff like that. So it is a bit easier. There's less names to remember in terms of like otherworldly creatures. Like I said, like you don't have to remember all the names. Like in A Court of Thorns and Roses, there's like the Fae, the Naga, the Ator, and all this, and it is a lot. But in this one, it's just dragons, so it's not too bad. People do have signets in it, but they're pretty easy to grasp. So Fourth Wing is also a good place to start. Last suggestion, but definitely not least, it's definitely not least because this was one of my favourite books last year, The Serpent and the Wings of Night. If you follow Sophia Tuxford on TikTok, you've probably seen that she started with ACOTAR, and she's read Fourth Wing, and she's read The Serpent and the Wings of Night and loved it. And for good reason, because it's just such a good book. This one is about vampires and humans. So again, there's not too many fantasy terms to get to grips with. As with any fantasy or romancy book, there is a bit of world building in it, but it's not too much. It's not too overwhelming, and it's not too sort of jargony. It literally just gets into it, and I really, really enjoyed this book. It's part of a duet. So there's this one and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, and there is a novella as well. So the duet basically means the two main characters that are in this one have another book. The series as a whole is called the Crowns of Nyaxia series, and that's going to contain 6 books. But I think at the moment it contains 3 and 2 novellas. So the 3 are The Serpent and the Wings of Night, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, which have the same two main characters. The next one is The Songbird and the Heart of Stone, and then the one that's coming out in August is part of that same, I think it's what is it? I can't remember what duet it is. There's the Nightborn duet. It might be the Shadowborn duet. And then there's going to be a Bloodborne duet as well. But yeah, the basic grasp of it is, I'm making this so much more complicated than it needs to be. But this one and The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, Nightborn duet. The Songbird and the Heart of Stone and the Fallen Kiss of Dusk, Shadowborn duet. The Bloodborne duet doesn't have names yet because they're not due to be out anytime soon. There are 2 novellas. There's a Six Scorched Roses novella that comes in between this and Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, and there's Slaying the Vampire Conqueror, which comes after the Ashes and the Star-Cursed King, I think. But you don't specifically have to read them in that order. You can read them in whatever order you want to. That's my list. If you want to get into reading romantasy books, that is a pretty good list, I think. All those books were 4 or 5 stars for me. I really, really enjoyed them, and I think you'll really enjoy them too, and I think it'll just really set you up for like a good... If we're being honest, I don't think you need beginner books to get into romantasy and fantasy. It just gets you sort of used to the world building. So when you open every book, you've got like 100 pages of like world building to go through. And I suppose if it's not something that you're used to, then it can kind of be like, what is all this information? But it's just basically getting used to like, oh, all these books do this. But you don't need beginner books. You can start wherever you want to. Like, I don't even know what you consider a not beginner book. Like, which author would you consider not beginner? I know people probably have opinions on that, but I just don't think you need... I don't really think that... I don't know if people are going to be like, how dare you compare authors like that? Not every author is the same as Sarah J Maas. But, you know, here we are, and I'm saying it, so deal with it. I'm just kidding. But anyway, that's my list. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching!